I remember the day the galaxy believed it still controlled its own future. The Galactic Council Nexus stood at the heart of known space, where hundreds of civilizations gathered beneath a crystal dome to decide the fate of entire star systems. Ancient empires argued over borders, treaties, and royal bloodlines that had endured for thousands of years. To them, humanity was little more than a newcomer, too young to matter, too inexperienced to influence history. My name is Daniel Brooks. Officially, I was a human janitor assigned to the Imperial Palace of the Nova Arctis Empire. I cleaned corridors, repaired maintenance systems, and kept my head down. Most nobles never noticed me, and that was fine. Invisible people hear everything. That morning, whispers echoed through the council. Reports spoke of royal heirs murdered across the galaxy and of a mysterious organization striking without warning. Then the next targets were revealed. The royal twins of Nova Arctis. The chamber erupted in fear. I quietly pushed my cleaning cart onward, listening. Something about the silence between those frightened voices felt far more dangerous than the shouting itself. From the service corridor, I could hear every word spoken inside the council chamber. The speaker raised a trembling hand, and the endless arguments slowly faded into silence. A holographic projection filled the center of the room, displaying the faces of 23 royal heirs. One after another, their portraits dimmed until only 2 remained illuminated. The twins of Nova Arctis, Prince Kalen and Princess Lyra. They are the next confirmed targets, the speaker announced. Galactic intelligence believes an organized network of assassins has infiltrated Coalition space. If the twins fall, the alliance between 6 major empires will collapse. War will follow within weeks. The chamber erupted. Military commanders demanded larger fleets around the Imperial Palace. Admirals proposed orbital blockades. Intelligence directors insisted that thousands of additional agents should be deployed immediately. Every solution involved more weapons, more soldiers, and more layers of security. No one asked why the assassins had succeeded 23 times before. I continued polishing the marble floor just outside the chamber doors. The motion was slow, deliberate, almost invisible. People rarely noticed the man holding a mop. They talked freely when they believed no one important was listening. One elderly counselor finally mentioned Earth. The human delegation may offer recommendations, he said with little enthusiasm. Several delegates exchanged amused glances. Humanity had joined the coalition only recently, and our experience was considered insignificant beside civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Another official flipped through a data file. There is also a human maintenance worker employed inside the Imperial Palace. Daniel Brooks, civilian contractor. A few heads turned toward the report before immediately losing interest. A janitor, one ambassador muttered. The discussion moved on without another word. I lowered my eyes and kept working. Being ignored had always been one of my greatest advantages. Inside the chamber, the debate continued to grow louder. But I had already noticed something far more important. People were preparing to defend walls. No one was preparing to protect children. vidIQ. The speaker finally recognized the representative from Earth. Compared to the elaborate robes and jeweled armor worn by the older civilizations, Ambassador Helen Carter looked almost plain. Her dark diplomatic uniform carried only the emblem of the United Earth Coalition. She walked to the center platform without hurry, waiting until the chamber settled into an uneasy silence. I have listened carefully, she began. Every proposal offered today strengthens the walls around the royal twins. None of them strengthens the people inside those walls. Several delegates exchanged puzzled looks. The strongest security system is not built on weapons, she continued calmly. It is built on ordinary people who are willing to act when everyone else freezes. The words lingered in the chamber. The Imperial Guard is highly trained. Your surveillance systems are among the best in the coalition. Yet 23 royal heirs have already died despite similar protections. That tells us your weakness is not technology. It is preparation for the unexpected. She activated a small holographic display. I recommend expanding emergency response teams, training every palace employee in evacuation procedures, establishing independent communication systems, and ensuring that every servant, engineer, medic, and maintenance worker knows exactly what to do if security fails. Murmurs spread across the chamber. One admiral leaned toward another and quietly laughed. "A maintenance worker?" he whispered. "Every citizen," Helen replied, having heard him perfectly. History repeatedly shows that ordinary people become extraordinary when they are prepared before a crisis begins. The commander of the Imperial Guard folded his arms. "Our guards have protected the imperial family for centuries. We require no assistance from cleaners or servants." Helen nodded respectfully. "I hope you are correct." She returned to her seat without another word. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before conversations resumed across the chamber. Most delegates dismissed her recommendations as unnecessary, convinced that elite soldiers alone could guarantee the twins' safety. Standing outside with my cleaning cart, I quietly smiled to myself. The ambassador had delivered the message exactly as intended. Whether anyone chose to listen was another matter entirely. The council chamber remained quiet for only a few seconds after Ambassador Carter returned to her seat. Then the silence cracked beneath a wave of restrained amusement. It began with a few whispers, spread through the rows of delegates, and soon open laughter echoed beneath the crystal dome. "The humans believe janitors can stop professional assassins," one governor said with a grin. A Vornak general leaned back in his chair, folding his forearms across his armored chest. "I have commanded palace security for 2 centuries, he declared loudly. "If a maintenance worker ends up saving the imperial palace, I will gladly surrender my rank and spend the rest of my life polishing floors." The chamber erupted again. Even delegates who rarely displayed emotion allowed themselves quiet smiles. To them, the suggestion was absurd. The fate of empires rested upon elite soldiers, ancient defense grids, and fleets powerful enough to darken the stars. Not on cooks, engineers, gardeners, or cleaners. The speaker struck his staff against the floor, restoring order. "The recommendation has been noted," he announced. "However, the Council agrees that the Imperial Guard possesses sufficient capability to defend the royal heirs." A unanimous chorus of approval followed. From the hallway, I lowered my mop into its bucket and wrung it out slowly. The polished marble reflected the brilliant lights overhead like a still lake. Around me, officials hurried from one meeting to another, discussing troop deployments, orbital patrols, and intelligence operations. Nobody looked twice at the quiet man cleaning the floor. That was fine. People reveal more when they think you are invisible. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, fragments of conversation drifted toward me. "The palace will be sealed. No one enters without authorization. The assassins cannot possibly breach such security." I listened without reacting. Strong walls create confidence. Too much confidence creates blind spots. By the time the council adjourned, the galaxy's greatest minds believed they had solved the problem. They trusted armor, weapons, and ceremony. They never considered that danger often walks through the same doors as everyone else. And neither does the person who stops it. I returned to the Celestial Crown before sunset, pushing the same maintenance cart I had used for years. The palace looked as magnificent as ever, its white towers glowing beneath the light of Nova Arctis while hundreds of guards patrolled every corridor. Since the council meeting, security had doubled. Checkpoints appeared at every entrance, armored patrols marched through the halls, and surveillance drones hovered above every courtyard. Everyone believed the danger would come crashing through the front gates. They were watching outward. I watched inward. As I replaced an air filter near the eastern wing, I noticed camera 42 flicker for less than a second. Most people would never have seen it. I logged the fault in my tablet, but the maintenance network claimed the camera was functioning perfectly. That was impossible. An hour later, a power relay in the service tunnels reset itself without any scheduled command. Again, the official system reported no malfunction. 2 impossible errors in one afternoon. Coincidences are comforting because they require no action. Patterns demand attention. The next morning I passed 3 technicians installing communication hardware outside the royal residence. Their uniforms were correct. Their identification badges were valid. Their tools matched palace regulations. Their boots did not. Imperial maintenance crews wore soft-soled footwear to protect the polished floors. These men wore reinforced tactical boots disguised beneath disposable covers. Small detail. Dangerous detail. I kept walking without slowing down. One of them smiled politely. I smiled back. Invisible people survive by never appearing curious. For the rest of the day I quietly inspected maintenance shafts, ventilation routes, and emergency access corridors. Every map I carried was already committed to memory, but memory needed refreshing. Every hidden passage, every locked service hatch, every backup generator could become important with little warning. By evening, my instincts had settled into an uncomfortable certainty. Nothing had happened, nothing obvious, anyway, but the palace no longer felt like a home. It felt like a battlefield waiting for someone to fire the first shot. VidIQ. The palace settled into an uneasy rhythm over the next several days. Guards rotated every 4 hours. Security drones followed perfectly programmed patrol routes. Engineers inspected scanners, reinforced doors, and shield generators. Everyone looked busy. Very few looked observant. I continued my work as though nothing had changed. Every morning I polished the marble galleries before sunrise. Every afternoon I serviced air recyclers and water systems. Every evening I emptied waste containers that most nobles never realized existed. It gave me access to every corner of the palace. While changing a ventilation filter beneath the children's wing, I quietly counted the seconds needed to reach the nearest maintenance tunnel. 34. From there to the emergency generator room. 41. Generator room to the concealed freight elevator. 26. I repeated the routes until I no longer needed to think about them. If panic came, thinking would only slow me down. I also began testing systems no one expected a janitor to understand. Backup lighting, emergency communications, manual door overrides, fire suppression controls. Every hidden switch still worked, though several had clearly not been touched in years. Someone had built these safeguards expecting disaster. No one remembered they existed. The twins often crossed my path during the day. Prince Kalen always asked questions about whatever repair I was working on. Princess Lyra insisted on helping whenever she thought the guards were not looking. I answered patiently but briefly. Children deserve normal conversations whenever they can have them. Watching them laugh made the intelligence reports feel painfully real. They had no idea someone wanted them dead. Neither did most of the palace staff. Late one evening I climbed into the highest maintenance passage overlooking the central celebration hall. Hidden behind decorative stonework, I watched workers prepare banners for the upcoming Grand Unity celebration. Thousands of guests would soon fill these corridors. Crowds create celebration. Crowds also create cover. As I packed away my tools, an old memory surfaced. One I had spent years trying to bury. Preparation is never wasted. You either use it, or someday you wish you had. The Grand Unity celebration arrived beneath clear skies and flawless ceremony. Every balcony of the celestial crown shimmered with banners representing allied empires. Diplomats, nobles, military officers, and foreign dignitaries filled the palace from sunrise onward. Music echoed through the halls while servants hurried between banquet rooms carrying trays of food and crystal glasses. To everyone else, it was a day of triumph. To me, it was the perfect day for an assassination. Crowds overwhelm security. Guards become distracted by important guests. Cameras watch too many faces at once. Noise buries the sounds that should never be ignored. I pushed my maintenance cart through the eastern corridor as I always did. No one questioned why the janitor was working during the celebration. Someone always has to clean up after important people. As I passed the main security office, every monitor flickered for an instant. 1 second, then everything returned to normal. The officer on duty frowned, tapped his console, and shrugged. A software hiccup, he muttered. I kept walking. There are no harmless glitches on the day your enemy chooses to strike. 5 minutes later, every light in the Western Service Wing dimmed before emergency power restored them. The backup systems activated exactly as they were designed to. Too early. Someone was testing them. I quietly removed a small flashlight from my cart and slipped it into my pocket. Nobody noticed. The royal twins were scheduled to appear in the central atrium within the hour. Thousands of visitors had already gathered to witness the ceremony. The Imperial Guard surrounded every entrance in polished armor, confident that nothing could penetrate their defenses. They were looking for attackers carrying weapons. They never looked twice at electricians, cooks, cleaners, or repair crews. As I entered the maintenance tunnel beneath the atrium, I stopped. Fresh footprints marked the dusty floor. Not one pair, several, heavy boots. Recent. They hadn't come from palace staff. I crouched beside the prince, studying their direction. They led toward an access ladder that connected directly to the children's private wing. Slowly, I stood. The celebration above continued with applause and music. Below it, hidden beneath polished marble and golden banners, 12 killers had already entered the palace. And they were exactly where I had feared they would be. The palace died in silence. One moment, music filled the grand unity celebration. The next, every light inside the celestial crown vanished. The crystal chandeliers faded into darkness, holographic banners dissolved, and the cheerful voices of thousands of guests turned into confused murmurs. Half a second later, the emergency lights struggled to life, bathing the corridors in a cold crimson glow. Then every communicator stopped working. No alarms, no announcements, nothing. That frightened me more than the blackout. A professional attack begins by stealing information before taking lives. I reached the maintenance ladder in 3 strides and climbed toward the children's wing. Above me, I heard armored boots pounding across polished floors. The Imperial Guard had finally realized something was wrong, but they were reacting without knowing where the danger actually was. The assassins already knew. As I emerged into the service corridor, Princess Lyra and Prince Kalen stood frozen beside 2 frightened attendants. They had heard the lights fail but had received no instructions. "Daniel?" Lyra asked, recognizing me immediately. I forced a calm smile. "Come with me." One attendant stepped forward. "We supposed to wait for the guard." "No," I answered quietly. "You supposed to survive." Something in my voice ended the argument. I led the twins toward an unmarked maintenance door hidden behind decorative wall panels. Few people even knew it existed. It opened onto a narrow service tunnel running beneath the palace, designed centuries earlier for engineers who maintained the life support systems. The children followed without complaint. Behind us came the first distant sound of weapons fire. Short, controlled, professional, not soldiers exchanging fire. Executions. I sealed the maintenance hatch and turned to the attendants. "Take them to Generator Station 3. Stay inside until someone gives today's emergency phrase." "What phrase?" one whispered. I looked directly at her. "If anyone has to ask, it isn't them." She understood. Taking each child by the hand, she disappeared into the darkness. I watched until they vanished around the corner. Only then did I turn back toward the palace. 12 assassins had entered the Celestial Crown believing they were hunting 2 frightened children. Instead, they had just been left alone with me. The maintenance hatch closed behind me with a quiet metallic click. For a moment, the tunnel became completely silent. The twins were moving away exactly as planned, guided through passages that almost no one remembered existed. If they kept walking, they would reach the emergency shelter long before anyone thought to search there. Now I could concentrate. I wheeled my maintenance cart into the nearest service room and locked the door. Inside were shelves filled with cleaning chemicals, replacement pipes, heavy wrenches, electrical cable, industrial adhesive, and compressed steam canisters. To most people, it was a storage closet. To me, it was an armory. I wrapped several meters of steel cable around my arm, slipped a heavy flashlight into my belt, and filled 2 empty spray bottles with concentrated degreaser. A steel mop handle replaced the lightweight aluminum one on my cart. Stronger, heavier, more reliable, simple tools, simple plans. Complicated plans fail when people start dying. A faint radio hiss echoed from the corridor outside. Someone was speaking in a language I didn't recognize, but professional movements sound the same in every language. Slow steps, controlled breathing, weapons held ready. They were clearing rooms. I switched off the storage lights and waited beside the doorway. The handle turned, very slowly. The first assassin entered without making a sound. Dark tactical armor covered every inch of his body except his eyes. His rifle swept across the room while a second figure covered the hallway behind him. Disciplined, experienced. Unfortunately for them, they were looking forward. The steel mop handle came down silently against the first attacker's wrist. His weapon clattered onto the floor before he could cry out. I drove my shoulder into his chest, sending him backward into his partner. Both lost balance for a single heartbeat. One heartbeat was enough. The compressed steam valve burst open in my hand, filling the narrow corridor with blinding white vapor. Confusion spread instantly. I disappeared into it. The hunt had begun, and for the first time that night, the assassins no longer knew who was hunting whom. The steam slowly drifted through the corridor, carrying silence with it. I stayed perfectly still, listening instead of looking. Panic makes people breathe harder. Professionals hide their fear, but even professionals cannot silence a racing heartbeat forever. One set of footsteps rushed forward. The second hesitated. Good. They had separated. I stepped through the thinning cloud and struck the nearest assassin across the helmet with the reinforced mop handle. The impact staggered him just long enough for me to hook the steel cable around his rifle and pull it free. Before he could recover, I slammed him against the service wall and left him unconscious on the floor. The second attacker fired blindly into the steam. The shots shattered pipes overhead. Water exploded across the corridor, instantly soaking the polished floor. I ripped an exposed power conduit from a damaged maintenance panel and dropped it into the spreading water. Blue sparks flashed. The assassin collapsed without another sound. 2 down. 10 remained. I kept moving. Stopping meant surrendering the advantage. The palace belonged to them only on the official maps. Beneath its marble halls stretched kilometers of maintenance passages that I had walked every day for years. Every hidden ladder, every locked hatch, every ventilation shaft had become part of my memory long ago. Their training was excellent. Mine included patience. Near the western generator room, I found something far more valuable than another enemy. A concealed data terminal. It had not appeared on any maintenance schedule. Someone had installed it recently. I connected my diagnostic tablet and bypassed the simple security lock. Files flooded the screen. Blueprints, guard rotations, security overrides, payment records. One encrypted transmission carried the authorization seal of the Emperor's own high advisor. I stared at it for only a second. The assassins hadn't entered the palace alone. Someone inside had opened the door. I copied every file onto my tablet, slipped it into my pocket, and quietly closed the terminal. The truth would matter later. First, I still had 10 killers waiting for me. The palace had fallen strangely quiet. The celebration above had dissolved into confusion. Guests were being rushed toward emergency shelters while the Imperial Guard fought to regain control of corridors they had believed were secure. Their commanders still thought they were chasing the assassins. In truth, the assassins were chasing me. I moved through the maintenance passages without hurry. Every intersection forced them to split into smaller groups. Every service hatch became another opportunity to separate hunters from one another. They had entered the palace with perfect coordination. Now they were alone. The next 2 never saw me. One triggered a pressure release valve I had armed moments earlier. A blast of superheated steam filled the narrow passage, driving him to the floor. His partner turned toward the noise instead of watching the shadows behind him. That mistake ended the fight. 6 remained. The palace itself became my ally. Automatic blast doors sealed behind retreating guards. Emergency lighting distorted depth perception. Maintenance tunnels carried every sound farther than expected, making footsteps impossible to judge. I never rushed. I simply waited. One by one, they disappeared. The final confrontation came outside the children's private wing. Their commander stood alone, weapon raised, his armor scarred from the night's failures. He studied me carefully before lowering the rifle slightly. "You are not a janitor," he said. "I am tonight." He laughed once. "We were told the guard would protect them. They tried. We underestimated you." "No," I answered quietly. "You underestimated ordinary people." He lunged without warning. The fight lasted only seconds. When it ended, he lay unconscious beside the others. 12 assassins had entered the Celestial Crown. None reached the royal twins. Minutes later, the Imperial Guard stormed into the corridor, weapons ready. They stopped in complete silence. 12 elite Vornak assassins lay defeated across the service wing. The children stood unharmed behind frightened attendants. I quietly placed my mop against the wall, removed the stolen data tablet from my pocket, and handed it to the captain of the guard. "You should read this first," I said. Then I picked up my cleaning cart. There was still water on the floor. Within hours, news of the attack spread across the Galactic Coalition. Every official report began with the same impossible sentence: the royal twins had survived. At first, most governments believed it was the work of the Imperial Guard. That assumption lasted less than an hour. Security recordings told a different story. They showed a human maintenance worker escorting the children into hidden service corridors moments before the palace security network collapsed. They showed him moving calmly through maintenance tunnels while elite guards searched the wrong sections of the palace. They showed 12 Vornak assassins entering the palace. Only one man walked back out. The footage was reviewed again and again. Military analysts could scarcely believe what they were watching. Daniel Brooks had used no advanced weapons, no powered armor, and no experimental technology. He had relied on ordinary maintenance equipment, careful preparation, and an intimate knowledge of the palace itself. Even more shocking was the evidence stored on the data tablet he had calmly handed to the captain of the guard. The encrypted files exposed years of secret communications between the assassins and High Advisor Selvar, one of the Emperor's most trusted advisors. Financial records, security overrides, and detailed schedules proved beyond doubt that the attacks had been planned from inside the imperial court. Selvar was arrested before sunrise. By midday, dozens of conspirators had been identified across the empire. For the first time, investigators connected the murders of 23 royal heirs to a single organization operating across coalition space. The conspiracy was larger than anyone had imagined. Inside the council nexus, the same delegates who had laughed only days earlier now sat in complete silence as the recordings played before them. No one joked. No one smiled. The Vornak general who had promised to surrender his rank if a janitor saved the palace slowly removed the insignia from his uniform and placed it on the council table. "I made a promise," he said quietly. No one tried to stop him. For the first time in generations, the galaxy understood that humanity's greatest strength had never been its fleets or its weapons. It had always been the ordinary people who refused to stand aside when someone needed protecting. The council summoned Earth's delegation only 2 days after the investigation concluded. Representatives from every major civilization filled the chamber once again, but this time there was no laughter. The atmosphere was heavy with gratitude and quiet embarrassment. The speaker rose first. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, he declared, "We offer humanity our deepest thanks. The royal twins live because one of your citizens chose to act when others could not." He turned toward Ambassador Helen Carter. "The coalition is prepared to grant Earth additional council authority, permanent military privileges, and whatever honors your government considers appropriate." Helen remained seated for a moment before calmly standing. "Earth respectfully declines." A wave of surprise swept through the chamber. "We did not help to gain influence," she continued. We helped because 2 children needed protecting. The silence deepened. If you truly wish to honor Daniel Brooks, she said, then let his actions become a lesson rather than a legend. She activated a holographic display showing civilians from dozens of different species. Every palace servant, every engineer, every medic, every teacher, every maintenance worker, every ordinary citizen should know how to respond during a crisis. The coalition should not depend solely on soldiers. It should prepare everyone. The proposal was simple: coalition-wide emergency response training, evacuation planning, civilian crisis management, practical preparation instead of blind confidence. For the first time in centuries, every delegate voted in complete agreement. Far from the council chamber, I quietly returned to work. The damaged corridors still needed repairs. Broken pipes had to be replaced. Scorch marks disappeared beneath fresh coats of paint. The royal twins visited whenever they escaped their lessons. They insisted on helping me polish the marble floors, though they usually made more work than they finished. I never complained. The palace felt alive again. When the emperor personally offered me noble status, wealth, and command of the imperial guard, I thanked him politely. Then I declined. I already had the job I wanted. Someone still had to keep the palace clean. And tomorrow morning, those floors would not polish themselves. Years passed, but the events at the Celestial Crown were never forgotten. Across the Galactic Coalition, every royal household adopted the civilian protection programs proposed by Earth. Palace servants trained beside soldiers. Engineers rehearsed emergency evacuations. Medics, teachers, technicians, and maintenance workers became part of every security plan. Countless lives were saved because ordinary people were finally trusted to act when crisis struck. I refused every title the emperor offered. I declined the medals, the wealth, and the noble estate. The only thing I accepted was a new mop after the old one finally broke. Prince Kalen and Princess Lyra grew into wise rulers, yet whenever they returned to the palace, they always found time to visit the maintenance corridors. They never addressed me by rank or title. To them, I was simply Daniel. My story became required reading in military academies, diplomatic schools, and leadership programs throughout the coalition, not because I defeated 12 assassins, but because I refused to leave 2 frightened children behind. Many years later, the oldest member of the Galactic Council closed his memoirs with these words: "For thousands of years, we judged civilizations by the size of their fleets and the power of their weapons. Humanity taught us a far greater lesson. Sometimes the fate of an entire galaxy is changed not by a general, not by an emperor, but by an ordinary janitor who refused to leave 2 innocent children unprotected."